Doctor disrespects nurse and patient surprises everyone. St. George's Hospital in London was in a state of frenzy. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the corridors as nurses and doctors moved like gears in a clock amidst the chaos. Clara Martins, the head nurse, coordinated her team with the precision of a conductor, her sharp gaze evaluating every move. With dark skin and curly hair, she was a strong and reliable presence, the emotional pillar that kept the team united. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, and the tension in the air was palpable, intensified by the alarming beeping of the heart monitor indicating that a patient had just arrived in critical condition. "Prepare the emergency room. We need a quick venous access," Clara ordered, her firm voice cutting through the confusion. With a nod, she signaled for Mariana Albuquerque, the young resident, to join her. Mariana, with her straight hair and large eyes, had an air of determination, but her inexperience still left her a bit hesitant. "Clara, what do you need me to do?" Mariana asked as she arranged the instruments on the work table. "Check the patient's records and call the cardiologist. We need everyone here. And do a quick triage of the vital signs," Clara replied, never losing focus. As the team worked frantically, Dr. Alexandre Mendonça, a renowned cardiologist with a big ego, walked into the room. He exuded a confidence that often bordered on arrogance. Clara greeted him but immediately sensed that he was more interested in showcasing his knowledge than in collaborating. "Clara, are you making sure everything is being done correctly?" he asked, a dismissive smile on his lips. "I don't want you to do anything that could compromise the patient's life because of, well, you know." The tension in the room escalated. Mariana, who was nearby and overheard the comment, froze. Clara paused for a moment, her heart racing. She knew she should ignore it, that it wasn't worth engaging in arguments, but indignation rose in her throat. "Dr. Mendonça, I have years of experience in this field, and I am doing my best to ensure the patient receives the care they deserve," Clara replied, maintaining her composure, although her voice trembled slightly. The pressure of the moment made everything harder. Joaquim Souza, an elderly patient in a nearby bed, observed the scene. He was an activist of the old guard, always fighting against injustices and prejudices. His tired but attentive eyes fixated on Clara. He saw the spark of determination in her gaze and realized she was a woman who would not be easily shaken. "That's unacceptable," Joaquim murmured to the nurse at his door. "She deserves respect." The other team members, who had been focused on their tasks, began to pay attention to the conversation. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and Joaquim's words echoed in their hearts. Clara, sensing their implicit support, decided she would not remain silent. "Dr. Mendonça, we don't have time for games. We need to work together, regardless of any differences. The focus must be on the patient," Clara said, now with more firmness. Alexandra, noticing that the situation was spiraling out of control, tried to change tactics, but his defensive posture was evident. "I was just joking, Clara. Don't take it personally. We all know the pressure is high here," he said, but his voice lacked the same confidence. The commotion in the room continued, with Clara and her team fighting to stabilize the patient, but the atmosphere was charged. Joaquim's words and Clara's determination were about to spark a wave of change. The hospital, which until that moment had seemed a space of healing, was now becoming a battleground for dignity and respect, and Clara was ready to fight. Clara stepped away from the chaos of the emergency room, feeling a heavy heart. The fluorescent lights in the corridor seemed even brighter, almost blinding, as she sought a place to collect her thoughts. Dr. Alexandra's racist comment still echoed in her mind, reverberating like an open wound. She headed to a break room, a small refuge that was almost always empty, where she could at least for a few moments escape the pressure of the hospital. Upon entering, Clara took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions consuming her. How could he say that, she thought, as tears threatened to well up in her eyes. It wasn't the first time she faced discrimination, but each incident seemed to cut deeper. She had always tried to be an exemplary professional, a role model for her children, and now she felt her beliefs were being challenged in a brutal way. Just then, the door opened, and Mariana, the young resident, walked in. The look of concern on her face brought Clara a small sense of relief. "Clara, are you okay?" Mariana asked, closing the door behind her. "I saw what happened. That comment was unacceptable." Clara forced a smile, but the pain was still present. "It's just another day, isn't it? Just another demonstration that some people will never change. No, that's not normal. No one should have to go through that. You're an amazing nurse, and he has no right to belittle your work because of your color." Mariana was visibly upset, her eyes shining with determination. "We need to do something about it." "Do something, and what do you suggest? Go to administration and tell them that an arrogant and racist doctor is belittling me? I'm not sure that will change anything." Clara shook her head, her tone a mix of skepticism and discouragement. "Of course it will. If we don't speak up, they'll think everything is fine. I can't just sit here pretending nothing happened. We need to unite." Mariana stepped closer, placing her hand on Clara's shoulder. A simple gesture, but comforting. "You're not alone." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. It was a relief to know that Mariana was by her side, that she wasn't the only one feeling the injustice. "Have you faced this too?" Clara asked, curious. "Yes, a few times. Not in the same way, but I've heard comments that made me feel awful. Once, an older doctor told me I shouldn't be a resident because I didn't belong in that environment. Can you believe it? He thought I wasn't capable just because I'm a woman and come from a humble background." Mariana spoke with fervor, her gaze determined. "Since then, I promised myself I would never stay silent. I understand. Sometimes it feels like we're fighting against an entire system, not just one person." Clara sat in a chair, feeling the weight of the conversation but also a newfound energy. "If you're willing to support me, maybe we can do something different this time." "Order." Mariana smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Let's meet with other nurses who were there and share what happened. We can't let this happen again without consequences. If others speak up, it might be harder for the administration to ignore what's going on." Clara nodded, a newfound sense of determination rising within her. "You're right. I won't let fear stop me from fighting for what's right. But we need to be careful. I don't want this to affect our careers. I understand your concern, but change starts with the courage to speak out. And you have more courage than you realize, Clara." Mariana was so convinced of her words that Clara couldn't help but feel inspired. The two women began discussing their experiences, sharing stories that revealed the pain and struggles faced in an environment that often felt hostile. The connection formed between them was strong and rooted in a shared desire for justice and equality. Clara realized that together, they could confront not only Alexandra's arrogance, but also the system that allowed such behaviors to persist. When they finally left the break room, Clara felt lighter. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was not alone. Mariana was by her side, and together they could pave the way for change. Joaquim woke up in his hospital bed, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains. Despite the pain in his chest, his mind was buzzing with thoughts about what he had witnessed. The injustice Clara had faced could not be ignored. He knew that, as an activist of the old guard, his role was not just to react, but to act. With a deep sigh, he picked up a notepad from the table beside him and began to write. "Dear Hospital Administration," he started, the words flowing as his pen danced across the page. With each line, Joaquim relived the moment Clara was belittled by Dr. Alexandre. He knew he could not remain silent. "Yesterday I witnessed an incident that not only wounded the dignity of a professional, but exposed a problem that plagues our institution and, indeed, society as a whole. Racism." As he wrote, his mind turned to the head nurse. He remembered her firm demeanor, even in the face of the offense, and how she continued to work with precision. Clara Martins is an exemplary professional, and her worth should not be measured by the color of her skin, but by the quality of her work and the compassion she shows to every patient. He paused, looking out the window, reflecting on his own journey, the battles he had faced, and the victories he had achieved. This inspired him to keep going. On the other side of the hospital, Clara and Mariana met in one of the busy corridors. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a mutual understanding between them. Did you see what happened yesterday? Clara asked, her voice a mix of frustration and pain. I did. And I can't believe this still happens here, Mariana replied, her eyes shining with indignation. We need to do something, Clara. We can't let this go. Clara nodded, feeling a new determination welling up inside her. But what can we do? Alexandre is one of the most respected doctors here. He has influence. Influence is not an excuse for racism, Mariana retorted, her tone firm. If we don't speak up, who will? We need to unite. The two women approached a group of nurses who had overheard Alexandre's comment. With courage, Clara addressed them. Hey everyone, we need to talk about what happened. This isn't just about me, it's about all of us. We need to come together and take this to administration. We're with you, Clara, said Anna, a more experienced nurse, placing her hand on Clara's shoulder. We can't accept this. It's time to speak up. The nurses began to gather, sharing their own experiences of discrimination. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a sense that there might be hope. Each story confirmed that the struggle was collective. If we stand together, we'll be stronger, said Mariana, looking at the group. Let's draft a statement and take it to administration. Meanwhile, Joaquim finished his letter. He read it aloud to himself, feeling each word. Change begins with the courage to stand up against injustice. I am here to support Clara, not just as a patient, but as a human being who believes in equality. With the letter complete, Joaquim decided he would not only send it, but also deliver it in person. He wanted his voice to be heard, for the administration to see the gravity of the situation. It's time for a real conversation about racism and discrimination in this hospital, he murmured to himself, determined. The next day, Clara, Mariana, and the nurses gathered in a break room. Let's come up with a plan, Clara said with renewed conviction. We need everyone to be aware of what really happened, and that this is not an isolated issue. It's a matter of human dignity. Mariana looked at Clara, admiring her bravery. And what if the administration tries to silence us? What if Alexandre tries to intimidate us? Then we won't let them intimidate us, Clara replied, her voice strong. We're doing this for all those who came before us and for all those who will come after. We need to fight for an environment where everyone is treated with respect. And so, with renewed determination, Clara, Mariana, and their fellow nurses prepared to face whatever lay ahead, united in a struggle that transcended the hospital, resonating with the echoes of a necessary and awaited change. Clara sat in a cold, almost impersonal room, the smell of alcohol and disinfectant still fresh in the air. The stark white walls seemed to absorb all the tension that filled the space. She knew she was about to enter a crucial meeting with the hospital administration, and the weight of the injustice she had faced in recent hours left her feeling restless. The words of Alexandre still echoed in her mind, a painful reminder that made her feel small, despite being a competent and respected professional. When the door opened, Clara looked up to see the familiar faces of the directors. They took their seats at the table, and Clara felt a knot in her throat. Why do I have to be here? She thought. Director Dr. Samuel began the meeting with a neutral tone, but Clara could perceive the tension in his eyes. Clara, we understand you had a disagreement with Dr. Mendonça. Could you tell us your version of the events? Clara took a deep breath, feeling the pressure rise. Dr. Samuel, what happened was not just a disagreement. Dr. Thorson. Clara stood up, her voice steady yet firm. Alexandre made a racist comment during a moment of crisis, undermining my abilities as a nurse. This isn't just a personal issue. It reflects a culture of discrimination that we urgently need to confront. The room fell silent for a moment. The directors exchanged glances, and Clara felt the need to reinforce her stance. I'm not just here to defend myself. I'm here to represent everyone who has suffered from this kind of behavior. This incident is not isolated. It's part of a pattern that harms not only employees but also the quality of care we provide to our patients. Dr. Samuel frowned. We understand your concern, Clara, but we need concrete evidence of what happened. At that moment, Mariana, who had been quietly observing the meeting from a corner of the room, gathered her courage and spoke up. "I was there, Dr. Samuel. I heard everything. The comment was made in front of several people and we can't let this go unaddressed." Clara looked at Mariana, feeling grateful for her bravery. "Yes, Mariana, you are a witness to what occurred. We need more people to step forward. We cannot allow fear to silence our voices." Dr. Samuel hesitated but finally said, "If there are indeed more witnesses willing to come forward, we will consider their statements. But we need to act carefully, as this could affect team dynamics." Clara glanced around the room and saw the reluctance on the faces of the directors. Caring for team dynamics cannot be more important than upholding the dignity of employees and the well-being of our patients. We need an environment where everyone feels safe to work, regardless of their race or background. The meeting ended without a clear resolution, but Clara knew she had taken the first step. What happened next depended on more courage and unity among everyone involved. As she left the room, Mariana followed her and commented, "Clara, you were incredible. We need to do something about this. We can't stay silent." Clara nodded, feeling a wave of hope wash over her. "We have to organize, Mariana. We can't let this happen to anyone else." That night, as Clara prepared to return to the hospital the next day, her hands trembled with anxiety. She knew things were about to escalate, but there was something in her heart that motivated her. The idea that perhaps change was possible. She decided that if necessary, she would record that moment to show the truth, no matter the cost. However, the worry lingered. What would be going through Alexandra's mind? He, who always seemed to have the answer to everything, now found himself in a vulnerable position. Clara knew he wouldn't stay quiet for long, and with that, Mariana's idea made her feel both a chill in her stomach and a fire within her. It was time to speak out and fight for a fairer workplace. The atmosphere in the hospital was charged with tension. Clara and Mariana, after weeks of fighting against institutional racism, had become the center of a growing movement within the unit. What had once been a whisper of indignation had transformed into a collective cry for justice. Nurses and doctors began to unite, not only in support of Clara but also in a deep desire to change the culture that allowed racist behaviors to flourish unchecked. In the break room, Clara prepared for another shift. The sunlight streamed through the windows, but even the brightest light couldn't dispel the shadow of anxiety hovering over her. As she organized her scrubs, Mariana entered with a determined look. "Clara, have you seen how things are changing? The nurses are starting to speak up. Today, some of them wore t-shirts with the slogan, 'Enough of racism,'" Mariana said, her tone vibrant against the gravity of the situation. "Yes, I saw. That's encouraging, but the pressure on us is only increasing. Alexandra won't stay quiet," Clara replied, gazing out the window, lost in thought. "He won't accept being challenged like this. It's in his blood, the need to control and silence." Mariana approached, placing a hand on Clara's shoulder. "But we won't let that happen. We have to keep fighting even if he tries to intimidate us." As the two spoke, Joaquim, who was recovering in a nearby bed, overheard their voices. He knew that Clara and Mariana were more than just nurses. They were leaders in a battle that transcended the hospital. Sitting up in bed, he interjected with an encouraging smile. "Girls, you are making history. Never underestimate the power you have. Your courage is inspiring many here." Clara turned to Joaquim, gratitude evident in her eyes. "Thank you, Joaquim. Your strength gives us hope. We need everyone to join us, but it's difficult when the hierarchy seems to side with him." Joaquim nodded. "I understand your concern, but what you're doing is important. It's not just about you, it's about everyone who has suffered discrimination. People are starting to see this. Change is coming." However, while Clara and Mariana drew strength from their fight, Alexandre, realizing that the situation was slipping from his control, began to act aggressively. He approached Clara during a break in the shift. "Do you really think this is a battle you can win? Look around, Clara. You're just a nurse. I'm a respected doctor," he said, with an arrogant smile that didn't hide his hostility. Taking a deep breath, Clara replied, "Respect is earned, Alexandra, not imposed." And your behavior is not worthy of a doctor. You may have your credentials, but that doesn't give you the right to belittle others. Mariana, watching from afar, couldn't remain silent. This isn't just about Clara. It's about all of us. If you think you can continue this behavior without consequences, you're very mistaken. Alexandra glared at her, his disdain turning into anger. Are you sure you want to get involved? You could end up getting burned. And so could you. Our voices are now stronger than your ego. We will not be silenced, Mariana replied, her tone resolute. The tension was palpable, and Clara, feeling adrenaline coursing through her veins, decided she wouldn't back down. We will be heard, Alexandra. If you think you can intimidate us, you are very mistaken. Change is happening and you will be left behind. With that, Alexandra walked away, but not without casting a threatening glance. Clara and Mariana knew the path ahead would be tough, but the support from Joaquim and many others gave them strength. They were determined not just to fight for themselves, but for all those who had been silenced. The battle was just beginning, and with each step they took, they felt that change was not only possible but inevitable. Clara walked through the hospital corridors, her heart racing. The atmosphere was heavy and tense, and she knew that the situation with Dr. Alexandra Mendonça was about to escalate. However, there was something different in the air. The determination in her steps reflected not only her personal struggle against prejudice, but also the hope that things could change. She headed to the ward where Joaquim was hospitalized and found him sitting on the bed looking out the window. Upon seeing her, a smile lit up his tired face. Clara, you can't let him get to you like this, Joaquim said, his voice soft yet firm. You're an incredible professional. You're not just a nurse, you're a leader. Clara took a deep breath, his words encouraging her. Thank you, Joaquim. I just don't know how far this can go. He has so much influence here. Joaquim shook his head. Influence isn't everything. What matters is courage. And you have that in spades. At that moment, Mariana entered the room, looking worried. Hi, Clara. Joaquim, I was thinking, we need to do something. We can't let him think he can keep acting this way. You're right, Mariana, Clara replied, feeling the adrenaline surge again. But what can we do? He'll try to discredit us at any cost. Mariana crossed her arms, resolute. I thought of something. What if we recorded the next shift? If he makes another racist comment, we'll have proof. We can't let this situation drag on. Clara hesitated, looking at Mariana with concern. What if he finds out? This could cost you your career. And staying silent, Clara, what would that cost you? We need to unite and show that we will no longer accept this, Mariana insisted, her gaze unwavering. Clara felt the strength of the younger resident's determination. You're right, we can't stay quiet, but we need to be careful. Alexandra is not someone who will easily be intimidated. Meanwhile, in the break room, Alexandra was observing the commotion. His gaze was contemptuous, as if he were waiting for the right moment to strike. He approached a group of doctors and began speaking loudly. That nurse Clara, does she really think she can be respected here? As if we don't know she's only where she is because of quotas. The room fell silent, eyes turning toward him. Clara, just a few steps away, felt a wave of indignation. His comment not only hurt her but also exposed the veiled racism that permeated the hospital. He has no limits, murmured Mariana, her tone heavy with frustration. He needs to be confronted. Yes, but how? Clara asked, her mind racing with ideas for a solution. Let's gather the nurses and residents who are on our side. If we can create a strong group, he won't be able to ignore us, Mariana suggested, her gaze determined. Clara nodded, feeling the energy of the fight forming between them. Let's do this, but we need to act quickly. We can't let him feel secure in his behavior. Back in Joaquim's room, they joined in a conversation about their plans. Joaquim, with his combative spirit, looked at Clara and Mariana and said, Don't forget, this isn't just about you. It's about all of us who have faced prejudice. If you fight, I'll be with you. Thank you, Joaquim. You're an inspiration, said Mariana, smiling. Let's make some noise, Clara declared, the fire of determination shining in her eyes. And let's show that we're in this fight together. The trio left the room, ready to face whatever came their way, uniting against a system that oppressed them so deeply. The battle was just beginning, but the hope and solidarity they were building among themselves was a powerful force that could not be ignored. The tension in the hospital meeting room was palpable. Clara and Mariana stood in front of a group of healthcare professionals, all with expressions that mixed anticipation and apprehension. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility resting on her shoulders. This was the moment she and Mariana had been waiting for, a space to openly discuss the discrimination issues that permeated the hospital environment. Thank you all for being here, Clara began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. We're here not just for ourselves but for all those who have been silenced and devalued. Today, we want to talk about the racism we've witnessed, that we've lived, and that we need to fight together. A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Mariana, beside her, looked at the faces of their colleagues, many of whom appeared reluctant, but some showed support. She gathered her courage and continued. This isn't just about Clara and Alexandra. It's an issue that affects us as a team. As healthcare professionals, we must unite to create an environment where everyone feels safe and respected. An experienced nurse, Pedro, raised his hand. I've always known these comments happened, but I never had the courage to speak up. I saw what happened to you, Clara, and it made me reflect on how much we need to change. That's exactly what we want, Clara said, encouraging him. It's time to speak up to make our voices heard. What happened wasn't an isolated incident, it reflects a culture that needs to be dismantled. Another nurse, Anna, spoke up. I've been through similar situations where my work was undermined because of my appearance. It's a heavy burden, and we can't continue to carry it alone. We need a safe space to express our feelings and experiences. Clara nodded, sensing the strength beginning to form in that room. We need to create a committee, a group that not only discusses these issues but takes action. That develops policies against discrimination and educates our colleagues about the importance of respect and diversity. Mariana, seizing the opportunity for engagement, interjected. And we need the administration to listen. We can't just be an isolated voice. We need to be a chorus. If we unite our experiences, we'll have greater weight. But what about Alexandre? A young resident asked, visibly W. What if he tries to silence us again? Clara looked into the eyes of the resident and replied, Then we need to show that we're not afraid. He may have power, but it's not greater than the truth we're willing to tell. If we all stand together, he won't be able to silence us. At that moment, Joaquim, who had been observing in silence until then, decided to speak up. His presence, even in a hospital bed, was striking. I'm a patient here, but I'm also an activist. What you're doing is important. I've written a letter to the administration that I intend to send. I talk about what I've witnessed. We cannot remain silent. What happened to Clara is unacceptable. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Joaquim's courage became a catalyst. Clara looked at him admiringly. Thank you, Joaquim. Your voice is powerful and necessary. We need you to share your experience. That will give even more weight to what we're trying to do here. I'll stand by you, he replied, his voice firm. If you need support, I'll be there to expose the truth. The conversation flowed naturally, and more colleagues began to share their stories. Each account was a brick in building a solid foundation for change. Clara felt that something was forming there. The unity among nurses, doctors, and patients was a force that could not be ignored. If we're going to do this, we need a plan, Mariana concluded, picking up a pen and a notepad. Let's jot down our ideas and schedule another meeting to discuss the next steps. This is just the beginning, Clara said, smiling as she looked at each face around her. We're in this together, and together we will make a difference. Clara and Mariana were sitting in a meeting room, surrounded by a diverse team of healthcare professionals who were now uniting around a common cause. The atmosphere was charged with expectation and a bit of tension, but there was also a new determination in the air. Clara, with her firm and resolute gaze, looked at her colleagues. "We need a safe space to discuss the racism that exists here, and that many of us have faced in silence for far too long," she said, her voice echoing off the white walls of the room. Mariana, next to her, nodded fervently. "Each of us has a story. It's time to hear these stories and begin to change this culture within our hospital." The young resident was visibly excited, her nervous fingers fidgeting with the pen as she prepared her notes. The nurses and doctors began to share their experiences one by one. A middle-aged nurse raised her hand, her voice trembling. "Once, a patient told me he didn't want to be treated by a black nurse. I felt powerless, as if my work had no value." The room fell silent. The pain and indignation on everyone's faces were palpable. The group felt increasingly at ease, and Clara encouraged the openness. These experiences are not just individual stories. They reflect a systemic problem that needs our attention. We must raise our voices so that this does not continue to happen, Clara asserted firmly. Among the voices that rose, a small nurse with a strong accent spoke up. "I've been through that too. Once, a doctor ignored my recommendation about a patient. It was as if my experience meant nothing just because I didn't have a doctorate." Her indignation resonated with the group, and Clara saw the fire of determination ignite in her colleagues' eyes. "We need to create a committee dedicated to discussing and implementing anti-discrimination policies," suggested Mariana, her voice clear and strong. "This isn't just about us. It's about our patients who deserve care free from prejudice." Clara smiled, admiring the courage of the young resident. At that moment, Joaquim entered the room, and despite his fragile health, his presence, "I heard what you're doing," he began, his voice firm and clear. "And I want to support this initiative. The hospital must be a place of healing, not just for bodies, but for souls as well. It's time to break the silences that perpetuate racism." Clara's eyes sparkled at Joaquim's support. "We need you here, Joaquim. Your voice is powerful and can help bring about change," she said, feeling a wave of hope. Joaquim nodded, his expression serious. "We shouldn't be afraid to expose the truth. If we don't speak up, we'll be allowing injustice to continue." The room was now filled with energy and commitment. Clara looked at everyone present and asked, "Does anyone have any objections to forming this committee? We need to act now." Silence. No sign of opposition. "Then it's decided," Mariana said with a smile. "Let's organize ourselves and prepare a proposal to present to the administration. We need a clear plan and allies who can help us implement this." Clara felt a wave of relief and hope wash over her. As colleagues began discussing the next steps, Clara felt stronger than ever. She knew they were just getting started, but the unity they were forming was a clear sign that the fight against racism in the hospital was gaining momentum. "We're in this together," she declared, and everyone present agreed, feeling part of a larger movement seeking justice and dignity. The meeting was becoming a significant milestone, not just for Clara and Mariana, but for all those willing to challenge the status quo and fight for a more just and equitable environment. Joaquim lay in his hospital bed, breathing a bit heavily, but his mind was buzzing with thoughts and reflections. The room was quiet, except for the occasional sounds of nurses and doctors passing in the hallway, but he knew that time didn't stop there. He had a role to play, not just as a patient, but as a mentor and symbol of resistance. As he looked out the window, Joaquim saw the cloudy sky over London reflecting his state of mind. He thought about Clara and Mariana, the two women courageously fighting against racism in the hospital. The activist knew it was crucial for them to keep morale high. With effort, he sat up in bed and called the nurse on duty. "Hi, Clara," he said when the nurse approached. "Can you bring me some paper and a pen? I need to write a few things down." Clara, a young nurse who already knew Joaquim, looked at him with concern. "You shouldn't be resting? Your body needs energy to recover." "I know, but what's happening out there worries me. And if I do nothing, who will?" Joaquim asserted, the determination in his voice making Clara hesitate. "Sure, I'll get you what you need," she replied, and quickly left. While he waited, Joaquim thought about what had happened in the hospital and the courage Clara and Mariana were showing. He knew they needed support, and he was determined to provide it, even while hospitalized. When Clara returned with the paper and pen, Joaquim began to write his message. "I want you to deliver this to Clara and Mariana," Joaquim said, handing the paper to Clara. "Tell them not to give up. Their fight is important, and they have the power to change things." Clara quickly read Joaquim's words, feeling a rush of emotion. "You're a true warrior, Joaquim. Your strength inspires us. I'm not the only one. There are many people willing to fight, and you, Clara and Mariana, are part of that. Don't let Alexandra intimidate you," he replied, a firm look in his eyes. "Be strong and stay united. That's the most important thing." As Joaquim spoke, Clara felt the urgency of the situation. She knew the pressure was mounting on her team, but she also felt a spark of hope ignite within her. The fight against Alexandra wasn't just hers. It was for everyone who cared about dignity and justice. When Clara left the room, Joaquim's determination echoed in her mind. She needed to rally the nurses and doctors who stood with her and Mariana. "It's time for us to unite," Clara thought as she walked through the hospital corridors, determined to take action. That afternoon, Clara convened an informal meeting with the nurses who were present during Alexandra's racist comment. They gathered in a break room, and the atmosphere was tense. Clara, with a serious look, began to speak. "Thank you for being here. We need to discuss what happened. Doctor, Alexandra's comment is not only unacceptable, it reflects a culture that we need to change. We cannot remain silent," Clara said, her voice steady. One of the nurses, Anna, raised her hand. "I also heard what he said. I was horrified. It can't be that this continues happening without consequences." "I agree," said another nurse, Carla. "We need to unite and do something about this. We can't let fear hold us back." "Exactly. Joaquim inspired me to speak up. He's not just a patient, he's an activist, and if he can fight, so can we," Clara exclaimed, feeling the positive energy growing in the room. The nurses began to share their own experiences of discrimination in the hospital, and more voices joined in. Clara realized that together they formed a powerful force. Determination was visible on each of their faces. "Let's organize ourselves. We need to take this to the administration. We cannot allow Alexandra to continue this behavior. We also need to ensure the hospital has clear policies against discrimination," Clara proposed, and everyone nodded in agreement. A climate of hope and solidarity enveloped the room, and Clara felt that despite the challenges, there was a path forward. She knew the fight would be long, but she was ready to face the challenge, not just for herself, but for everyone battling prejudice. Clara was sitting in a meeting room at the hospital, her heart racing as she waited for the administration. The tension in the air was palpable, and Mariana's presence beside her offered some comfort. They had worked tirelessly to get to this point, and the recording that Mariana had made during the shift would be the proof they needed. The hospital director, Dr. Gomez, entered the room, followed by other members of the administration. The atmosphere felt dense, as if everyone knew this moment could change the hospital's course. "Good afternoon, everyone," Dr. Gomez began, looking at Clara and Mariana. "We are here to discuss the situation involving Dr. Alexandra Mendonça. Clara, do you have something to say?" Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "Yes, Dr. Gomez. What happened during the last shift was not just a personal offense. It was a reflection of a culture of racism that needs to be confronted. I brought a recording that can clarify what really happened." She glanced at Mariana, who was ready to press the play button. The audio filled the room, and Alexandra's arrogant voice echoed, dripping with contempt. The comment he made about Clara's capabilities as a nurse reverberated in every corner of the room, and the expressions on the director's faces turned to disbelief. "This is unacceptable!" exclaimed one of the directors, Donna Helena, as the recording ended. "We cannot tolerate this behavior." I have always respected the team and the patients, protested Alexandra, who had just entered the room. He looked nervous, knowing his position was at stake. This was taken out of context. I am not a racist. Clara stood up, rage and indignation coursing through her. No, Dr. Mendonça, it was not taken out of context. Your comment was a clear display of contempt and prejudice. We are not here just for me, but for everyone who has suffered discrimination in this hospital. Mariana, feeling the strength of Clara's words, added, and we are not the only ones here. We have the support of many colleagues and patients who also do not accept this kind of behavior. Joaquim, for instance, had the courage to speak out, and his voice is just as important as ours. The presence of Joaquim, who was in the audience, brought a sense of gravity to the situation. He stood up, leaning on his cane. I am a patient, but I am also an activist. What happened to Clara is not an isolated case. It is a systemic issue that affects many of us. We cannot allow fear to silence those who fight for dignity and respect. Dr. Gomez looked at Alexandra, who was visibly agitated. Dr. Mendonça, how do you intend to respond to this? What happened here today is not just a matter of words. It's a matter of ethics and respect in the treatment of our colleagues and patients. Firing me is not the solution, insisted Alexandra, trying to regain control of the situation. I am a good doctor, and I shouldn't be punished for a moment of weakness. Clara shook her head, her determination growing. This is not about you, Dr. Mendonça. It's about a system that needs to change. If you truly believe you can be a good doctor, then you should understand that change begins with accountability. And in this case, that accountability is yours. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed Clara's words. Finally, Dr. Gomes exclaimed, we need a solution that not only addresses this incident but also initiates real change in our organizational culture. After a lengthy discussion, the decision was made. Dr. Mendonça, your dismissal will be effective immediately. We will implement a committee to discuss and create policies against discrimination in our hospital, Dr. Gomes stated firmly. The room erupted in murmurs, and Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Mariana hugged her, and Joaquim, with a smile. The atmosphere of tension was replaced by a spirit of hope and renewal. In the days that followed, Clara was promoted to supervisor of the new committee, a symbol of resistance and change. She looked at Mariana, who now also held a prominent position, and at Joaquim, who had become a mentor and friend. Together, they were ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, but now they understood that the fight for justice and dignity was a collective journey. Let's make a difference, Clara said, determined, and together we can ensure that what happened here never happens again. The room lit up with smiles and hopes as the new chapter of the hospital's story began to be written.